It's time for the Ward Scott Files, hosted by John Martin. Join the Salty Dog and his captain, Ted Yoho. Search for the Ward Scott Files on Facebook, Vimeo, and over 30 audio platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Now here's your host, the Salty Dog, John Martin.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Ward Scott Files, hosted by yours truly, John Martin, the old Salty Dog, and my dear friend and colleague, I like to call him Captain Ted Yoho. Glad to have
you. Good morning, old Salty Dog. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm blessed. I'm blessed, my friend, and good old USA. You know how it is in Fort Hawthorne, broadcasting live.
Fort Hawthorne. Yeah. We've got the coast covered here on the St. Johns River, and we lack of Florida.
I hear you, man. All right. We're glad everybody's aboard. We're going to start out talking about a meeting that is supposed to happen today at the White House. None other than President Trump is going to meet with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and supposed to be, according to all reports, they're going to sign a, quote, minerals deal, which essentially is a way for us to tie ourselves economically, get potentially repaid for all the billions that we have sent them, and our relationship economically going forward. And that's what they're telling us. We'll have to wait and see. But U.S. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, I hope I'm saying his name, announced yesterday, Thursday, that the United States and Ukraine have struck a deal on strategic minerals as well as oil and gas amid peace talks for ending the war with Russia. So as I say, they're supposed to sign the deal today. What do you think about that, Ted?
I think it's great. As an aside, Scott Bessent, I think that's something we can talk about in another show or another time. He worked for the Soros camp or organization there for quite a while and was listed as a Democrat or donated to them. But this deal, if this goes through, it's going to be and unlike any other foreign policy I've seen in my lifetime or studied on the heavy hand of Trump, laying this out and bringing Zelensky to the table, who said, absolutely not, this is not going to happen, this won't happen. But now he's got him engaged. He's got Putin engaged to the sideline now, it seems like, because this is the forefront. And if this happens and peace does come, I don't know, John, what do you think? Is President Trump up for the Nobel Peace Prize when you compare to what Obama did?
Yeah, Obama if people may not remember this, but President Obama, I mean, all you do is see now that he got the Nobel Peace Prize. But if you go and investigate what he actually did to get that, there's not much out there. He even laughed. He gave a speech basically in Egypt, and they gave him the Nobel Peace Prize shortly after that. And if you recall, Ted, even he kind of chuckled about it when asked about what did you actually do. He didn't actually do anything.
Yeah, when they ask you, what have you done to earn this, it wasn't very good. It's kind of like when Teddy Kennedy was running for president, and the interviewer asked him, why do you want to run for president? He looked like Joe Biden. He just went blank for about a minute. He couldn't answer that. And that's kind of like Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, maybe we need to get our good friend Elon Musk to send him an email saying, list the 5 things you did to deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. That would be an interesting response, don't you think?
Yeah, by the end of the day, you're out of here.
Yeah, you're gone. Of course, thank God he's gone at the moment anyway.
Well, you know, I had this as another aside, excuse me. One of the biggest threats to our nation, and when we were on the Ward Scott file talking to Ward, I had coined this word, the Obamanization of America, and how what we're seeing today prior to this past election was all the DEI, the wokeism, all the change from our traditional values for a couple hundred years were being thrown out into the trash, and just saying those things are bad, bad, bad. And so with the election of Trump, it's ended the Obamanization of America for a period of time. Hopefully we'll never see it again.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I don't know why it popped in my head, but today, the 28th, I believe, is, I think they're calling it a blackout, something that the Reverend Sharpton has put out there, that you're not, if you black people or are not supposed to buy anything today as a signal that they're protesting, I guess, Trump's actions in some form or fashion. I don't really see that catching a whole lot of traction from the folks that I talk to.
I hope Reverend Sharpton, I wish him the best, and I hope he keeps out there and being the loudmouth megaphone that he is, just putting that poison out there of how bad America is, how unjust America is. And I hope he recruits AOC and Schumer and all these people. It's pathetic, but I hope they stay out there because I want that to be the face of the Democrat Party because they'll never win another election.
Yeah, and they talk about budget deficits and everything else. If Al Sharpton simply paid his taxes, that might actually have something to do with lowering.
John, you're going a little too far there. You're putting pressure on him. You can't ask a minister to pay his taxes. It's interesting. I don't know if you read about Chuck Schumer was saying all these laid off workers and, the jobless rate in D.C. is going up, but it's not as high as you would think. And those numbers will go up. But he's asking all the Democrats to bring laid off workers that got laid off due to Doge to be at the State of the Union.
March 4th, I think it is. He's saying invite them all in there.
Yeah. Let's just bring that in. And, you can have Al Sharpton lead the congregation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I had it in my notes. I'm glad you brought that up about what Schumer is doing. People, the numbers of houses are going up for sale in the D.C. area. And when we talk about the D.C. area, we talk about not only the district, but basically Maryland and Virginia in there. And, the question is, how is this going to impact elections? Because one of the things that Schumer and his ilk are trying to push out there is this is going to be a major issue leading into the midterms and things, this federal workers. Now, I don't know about you, Ted, but I've been asking specifically people in different walks of life that I run into about this, and I've not really heard anyone say that they're really concerned, and maybe this will come out crass, I don't really mean it that way, but they're overly concerned about the layoffs of federal workers, especially centered around D.C. I don't hear much of that in my neck of the woods, so to speak.
I would have to agree with that and face it. Nobody wants to lose their job. But when you're looking at righting the ship of America with $34 to $36 trillion in debt, there has to be some changes. And you and I have talked about this. You can do changes one of a couple of ways. When you're up against the wall, you can be proactive and do the things we're seeing now, or we can wait. As we know that there's a gentleman we both know really well who's lived in 3 countries where the currency overnight had gone to zero, and they wake up, the government tells them our currency's gone to zero. You have 30 days to exchange it, and it was valued at 30% of what it was before they went to bed. That's what will happen if we don't have these drastic changes. So I'm very thankful that we're being proactive. It's ugly, and it's going to get uglier because he's only gone into a few agencies. Wait till you go into the VA more, wait till you go into the Department of Education. The USDA is one of the largest employers of government workers. It's over 100,000. And there's a lot of those people that are going to lose their job because they're going to have to justify while they're there. And so this is a needed change. They'll have plenty of people that'll show up for the State of the Union on the Democratic side. But I think the American taxpayers, when all the smoke settles and they look at the results, they'll be happy with that. And if they can't see it in this generation, the future generations will be really appreciative because it was righting a wrong or not a wrong, but just correcting the course of our nation.
Well, Ted, I used to say all the time, and this is way before Doge and everything else, and I just pull this out of thin air, but I think it's certainly proven to be true. I used to say that, I believe you could essentially, and I'm talking painting with a broad brush, cut the federal government of bureaucracy by 20%, and we wouldn't even see the difference.
You know what? I think that's so true. I'll give you a case in point. When Rick Scott became the governor, he called everybody into his office that was in charge of the different agencies. What do you do? What are you supposed to do? how can you do it better? And he had massive layoffs, and people were mad. And I had a guy from one of the water districts, St. John's Water River District, come into my office, and he was complaining about, woe is me, Governor Scott's laid all these people off. And we had, I think it was over 125 people, which I found fascinating that they had that many people. And he was talking about they had all these airboats and all this thing. And so the question I asked him was, let me ask you, can you do the job you were tasked to do with the team you have? He goes, oh, yeah, we can do that fine. And I just kind of stared at him, kind of smiling. I said, you know what you just told me, right? I said, you told me you had 125 employees too many. And I think, going back to your point, you could lay off probably 20%. And I think it would become more efficient. I saw stuff up there. Every turnover of Congress, you see all these books being thrown out, binders, the 3-ring binders, the nice plastic ones, by the thousands in trash bins, look like they've never been used. They're just throwing them out, and they'll buy new ones for the next, instead of recycling that stuff. And
well, you were talking
proud of ourselves. We gave back $200,000 pretty much every term I was in office. We gave back, I forget how much it was total.
Well, you were talking about former governor and now current senator from the great state of Florida, Rick Scott. And I was thinking about, and I probably sound a little bit like President Trump. I'm jumping all over the place, but you reminded me of a story about Rick Scott that I've always thought not only symbolized how great a governor he was, but how crazy the federal system is. There was the government, the federal government was going to give, I want to say, and I could be wrong about this, like $8 billion to the state of Florida for infrastructure for the super railway from like Orlando to Miami.
Right.
And Governor Scott said, well, we don't really need that. But basically, if you want to help us with transportation needs in Florida, he wrote them a detailed letter about certain roads and the port systems and all that, and listed, this is where we really need the money to do exactly what you're saying, improve transportation and the economy of Florida. And I don't know if you remember that, but they turned him down flat. He didn't accept the money. He didn't accept the money. And as far as I remember, the money then went out to California for their railway, which is not even, they spent that money and there is no railway out there. So, I mean, Governor Scott told them what we needed. I can only imagine that if President Trump were president at that time, we probably would have got that money for what we actually needed and not just create something out of thin air. That's kind of what the government does.
That's a good comparison. You look at somebody like Governor Scott that started that change of reforming government in Florida. You look at the surplus we have, and then he passes that off to another strong conservative governor, DeSantis, who's done a great job. Compare that to San Francisco and the state of California, New Jersey, Illinois, New York, all these Democratic-run governments that don't worry about the bottom line or the taxpayers. It's just what more can we get from the governor or from the government? And I think that's a great example of how you govern properly for the people or how you govern for the government. And it's a different mindset. The way the government is set up, it's for the people, we the people. But for those people, it's kind of like the Chinese Communist Party. You're there to serve the government. And that's the way I look at those states that are run that way. What can you do for us? It's opposite of what John Kennedy said.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's opposite, really, if you think about it, Ted, for the founding of the nation, that we're supposed to be a republic of independent states that come together under the Constitution for a common good, if you will, and to work out things between us and, common economies and that type of thing. And we've strayed so far away from that states aren't near as independent as they once were. And I think that's something I really haven't heard the president. He's talked about it kind of indirectly with education and stuff like that, turn it back to local control. And he's talked a little bit about it in FEMA. But I think that's something that they need to investigate more, is to actually return back to being a true republic, and that the federal government's role in a republic is nowhere near what it's doing now. I mean, it's the whole federal system could be cut down probably to 10% of what it is if it actually went back to the constitutionality of things.
You're absolutely right. I'd written a policy paper. It was my first term in Congress. It's called The Devolution of the Federal Government. Return back to the states that what the states were designed to do, and remove from the federal government that which they should not be doing, and put them back to where they do what they're supposed to do. And the number one charge for the federal government is national security. And when, I was on Ward Scott a lot back before he passed, obviously, we talked about, a list of things. One, what was the biggest threat to America? Well, it's our debt, it's China, it's the borders, it's energy, education. And if you look at what is going on with the debt, I mean, they're addressing it. I mean, I am so thankful. And again, they're being proactive. It's going to be ugly, but I think the results will be there. And if people are so upset with the way it went, if it's just a mess and fiasco, well, 2 years from now, guess what? You can change the makeup of the House and the Senate. And that's the beauty of our system. And then China, people need to understand China's goal is to be the world hegemon, to take the world, to have control of the world, and everybody be a vassal state, meaning they're subservient to China. And they want to do that to be economically the leaders and militarily. And you look at what Trump is doing. He's got tariffs that are coming out so fast that people can't really track them. But he's playing, when he first came out, he put a 10% tariff on China, but he's bumping it up. And what I see right now in the Wall Street Journal is Asian stocks slide after Trump tariff threats. So just his presence and his strong will is rocking the markets, and it's going to put pressure on Xi Jinping because they have a terrible economy right now. And it's interesting because he's going after our debt, he's going after China, and these are the biggest threats. And then our border. What I read today, there is a 93 or 97% decrease in the amount of people crossing our borders. I mean, what more can you want? And in energy, he's opening up the energies, drilling and all that. And he's got Linda McMahon at education. Do you think there's going to be some changes in gnashing of teeth and spinning of heads there when they start going, when the Doge department shows up?
Yeah, you mentioned the border, and I think rightfully so. As far as when we think about the border, we think about our border with Mexico and the numbers coming across. But one of the more interesting stats I saw this past week was down at the southern border of Mexico with Central America. The amount of people coming into Mexico on the southern end has dropped off to almost zero. And that is huge right there, because if they don't come into Mexico, they're obviously not going to be able to come this way. And I got to believe that Mexico actually likes that, because if we stopping them at our border and they keep coming into Mexico, that's going to be a huge problem for them. But I've seen some reports that people are self-deporting on a regular basis now. It's turned quite a bit around. And I think those statistics are as important as even the ones at our actual border.
I agree with you. And again, it's just taking action and doing what's right for our nation. And I know there's going to be some mad people that, he's done this. It's inhumanitarian. It's not humanitarian. But yet he's doing what's best for this nation. And, we would all do that for our own families. And when you're the leader, the president of the United States, this is your family. And so let's do what's best for our family. It's such a welcoming change that I think, again, I think the results down the road will speak for themselves.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to delve into some more of these topics. Sure. And a little deeper dive, so to speak, after we take a commercial break. So we're going to go to break. Please support our sponsors. If you would like to become a sponsor, you can see the little tagline there about how to contact Freddie and become a sponsor of our show. We greatly appreciate it, but we'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. I wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Well, we're back, and as I said before, we left for a break. Please support our sponsors, and if you don't, we'll send the warthog that you saw in that video.
I laugh every time I see that warthog.
You don't want nothing to do with that warthog. Well, Ted, we were talking a minute off the air there, and I mean, some of the stuff that they're uncovering at the national level, not only the fraud and the expense, but just the sheer antics that they're doing. You just can't make this stuff up. I mean, I don't think I could create something out of thin air like this. It's just beyond bizarre. And what I'm talking about, the latest example is what Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, she has hit the ground running, so to speak. What she's uncovered, I think I might run out the door if I saw all that. But in case you haven't heard about this, Tulsi Gabbard, who is basically in her position, she's kind of the umbrella head of all the different types of security. Is that not true? Kind of, in a way, it's an umbrella position. Well, she's uncovered a inner office, if you will, chat room, not that goes out to the general public, but I'm assuming it's supposed to be so they could communicate how they're doing their job and that kind of thing, and keep it, because it's sensitive information. But the sensitive information apparently that they were talking about was their various sexual fetishes, sex changes. And I'm just going to give you one example, okay?
Pornography was on it too.
It's insane. One example, and I'm going to, put your hands over your ears or get the children out of the room. But there was one that kind of sums them up, where this person had a sex change. Now, this is a federal government employee in the intelligence field that is chatting with others in the intelligence field that this person has a new vagina. They had a sex change. They went full bore. And talked about how much fun it is to have basically sex with their new body part, I suppose.
We're going to have to censor you, John.
It's just, I mean, I got my red shirt on. It's just, you can't make this stuff up, Ted. And apparently it's over 100 of them. We're doing this on a daily basis. Tulsi uncovered it, and they're all going to be fired if they haven't been already. It's just, this is our money and this is our time. I get speechless almost by it. It's just insane.
Well, when you look at the mission of the NSA, that's our top national security agency. And for these people to be putting that garbage out there on government servers that is restricted specifically for, intel and things like that, it just shows you a lack of discipline that has creeped into these agencies that is being cleaned up. And again, there's going to be a lot of gnashing and turning of heads, gnashing of teeth, turning of heads, but it's needed. I mean, this is really needed. And think how much more efficient if people focus on their jobs instead of that stuff, how much more efficient those agencies would be. And that's
I guess if there's any good news in it, I try to look for the silver lining, so to speak. Those people probably couldn't be blackmailed because what do some foreign agency comes in there. What are they going to say? I have pictures of you doing such and such, and they're going to say, really? Send them to me.
Yeah, really.
On Facebook. I mean, it used to be that you worried about being compromised in an intelligence position, but these people don't seem to care about anything. I mean, it's just, what the heck are they doing? I guess that's one reason they don't want to do the email of the 5 things they did, because who would want to read those 5 things?
Well, you know what? And again, these are good days in America. Hopefully this will change, and they'll set a new tone for how you're supposed to act in government. I mean, I think we can all remember that aide that was in the Senate, and he was in one of the Senate committee rooms having anal sex with another guy naked, and it's being filmed by the cameras in there. It's just like, take your stuff elsewhere.
I mean, it's nuts.
I wanted to bring up something since you were talking about the NSA. This is in the Wall Street Journal. Secret U.S. drone program helps capture Mexican cartel boss. Now, if it's a secret drone program, you probably shouldn't put it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because you like to keep the effectiveness of that. And so now they know we're using drones, U.S. drones, to capture people in Mexico. Not a smart move.
Yeah, well, they being a cartel, they're probably beginning to change their attitude a little bit, because you remember the famous kind of shot, if you will, that was just before Biden, I think it was before the election, where they were smuggling these human trafficking over the border, and literally you had one of the cartel guys look between the fence at the cameras and kind of go like that and smile with his mask on. It's just, they had no fear whatsoever. And I would imagine some of them are beginning to fear what might actually happen.
I think so. And I think it's going to transmit a level of respect for American law and order, but it has to go from the top down. Trump needs to follow it as much as everybody else. He's doing stuff that's kind of dicey, and it's going to be challenged in court. And I'm all for that, because you look at Obama, all the presidents have done that. You've got to push the envelope on some of these things, especially when you're trying to correct a terrible situation. And I look forward for this to continue, because it's going to give you and I a lot of fodder to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, Ted, I know when you served in Congress, you obviously spent a lot of time in D.C., probably sometimes more than you wanted to. But we're talking about earlier in the show about weaponizing these federal workers that are being potentially laid off and all of that, and bringing them to the President Trump's State of the Union address. I want to give you a few statistics here. This comes from the Washington Post. D.C. is showing signs of economic strain amid federal government cuts. Unemployment claims in D.C. jumped sharply last week, and this is according to the Washington Post, a sign that the Trump administration's aggressive cuts to federal jobs and spending are beginning to take a toll on the Capitol. U.S. government claims in the D.C. district increased. This is just the district, not like in Virginia and Maryland. but it increased to 2,047 for the weekend of February 22nd, a 25% increase from the previous week and fourfold increase from the same week a year ago. So it is beginning to have some effects. Now, I'm not saying all of this is due to the DOGE program, but it is beginning to have an effect on those folks there. And it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
It is. And I think I mentioned this to you over the break, that going through what Elon Musk and his team are doing, they're looking at all these government contracts. There's a lobbying firm, consulting firm, Boswell Allen up there in DC. 98% of their funds come from the United States government. Their contracts are valued at $65 billion. Just that one company. And I know you had mentioned earlier about moving federal offices out of DC. I think this is something that really needs to happen. Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Ag under Trump, the first term, he wanted to move the USDA like into the heartland, like in the middle of the nation, so it's equidistant, so people could come there. And he got so much blowback because it would be too expensive for lobbyists and people to fly to DC for some things and to have to fly out, because when you go to DC, you want to meet with everybody, and there's some rationale behind that. But you look at the cost of that real estate in DC, it's probably some of the highest priced in the nation per square foot. I know it is because we looked at it. There were apartments we looked at buying, 10 years ago. It was like $900 to $1,000 per square foot back then. So I think this is an adjustment that needs to happen. I think people will welcome it.
Yeah, I think, like I said, at the top of the show, that I just don't hear this outcry in the communities. And I travel around the state quite a bit. I talk to people in different parts of the country quite a bit. I'm not saying they don't concern about people. Like you say, if someone loses their job, it impacts their family, all that stuff. People are concerned about that. But the idea that the federal government is going to shrink by any amount whatsoever, or some of it's going to be diversified out into the country, I don't hear anybody really objecting to that. The only ones that seem to be objecting to that are either the Democrat politicians or the people we're finding out they're paying to protest and those kind of things. That's another thing DOGE has uncovered. We've been paying people to protest ourselves.
We sure have. This is something we knew about, but you bring it up, you get thrown, you just get sidelined up there because they're protecting the bubble, they're protecting the beltway. But I know people that work for the USDA all over the country that are working remotely, and they have to come in now. It's going to be inconvenient for them to come in, but I think they need to come in unless it's something they can do 100% online and not meet with consumers or constituents, if they're number crunchers. But I think there's a program that probably can be developed if it's not developed. When I was on the Ag Committee, the USDA had put out a contract to redo the whole USDA software, and it was in the billions of dollars. Took them years to make, like 5 years. And when they went to put it on, it was already, number one, outdated. Number two, it didn't work. So those are the kind of things that happen up there. And you're like, how can this happen? Of course, they'll say, well, that was the previous administration. And I don't know if you read about when they went into the government accounting office, the DOGE team, they said their computer software was so outdated that they didn't even know how it existed anymore. And, that's where I'm happy to see somebody like Musk come in there and just, he understands that. And those young brainiacs, I mean, they can fix that. You and I probably, we'd be out pulling weeds if we had to be tasked with it.
Well, just to show you just how insane things are getting, Lee Zeldin, who is now the head of the EPA, another great choice by the president, by the way.
He's a good guy.
he was on a talk show just the other day I was listening to in the car, and I hope people will listen to us, by the way, not only on YouTube, but wherever you get your favorite podcasts and Facebook. Chime in anytime. We'll try to respond to you. We're growing every single day through our listeners' help. So spread the word. But I was listening to Lee Zeldin, and he was talking about how many billions of dollars he essentially found in fraud within EPA. Imagine that. But he talked specifically about Stacey Abrams. Now, people may not remember Stacey Abrams, who, by all claims is still the governor of Georgia, right? They talk about not conceding the election. She has still not conceded that election, by the way, of like 8 years ago now. But Stacey Abrams actually got $2.5 billion. With a B now, $1 billion, Stacey Abrams organization, for what I'm not sure, with the EPA. And that's crazy enough. But then after giving her the grant, the EPA sent her a training film about how to do a budget. So you give someone, I don't know, Ted, if they gave me $2.5 billion, I'd probably figure out something to do with it. But so they give her a $2.5 billion budget and then train her supposedly on how to use it. Shouldn't they train her before they give her the money?
They shouldn't give her money regardless. That money should not be going there. And that goes right back to this organization in DC. It gets 98% of its government funds, the $65 billion. They're the ones doing the training video on how to do a budget. I mean, if you're at that level of government and wanting to be a governor of a state, you damn sure you should know how to do a budget.
You would think so. Well, just to show you how crazy the libs are getting, very famous liberal, Mr. Jon Stewart, no kin to this John. He does a show now. Well, he's been doing a show for years, but he's just come back right before Trump got elected. And I want to play a video of Jon Stewart. He's talking about some of the stuff that Doge is doing and all of that kind of stuff. But watch his reaction, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Wow.
Yeah, check this out.
Negotiate for all their f***ing drugs because we've already paid for them with our subsidies. Are you f***ing kidding? Come on!
Yeah, I mean, that's Jon Stewart, who, and sometimes he's somewhat reasonable, but here he is just slamming a coffee cup, said he's got to take himself to the emergency room. I mean, these people, I guess the word is unhinged. They're becoming, Trump is, he's got to be laughing at this stuff.
He has to. I mean, and God bless him. I hope he stays safe. But the left, they're just going crazy. And, I don't know if you saw that thing of Chuck Schumer leading a rally up there.
Yeah, trying to sing and chant.
An old white Jewish man that's all hunched over and going, "We're gonna beat them. We're gonna win.
We're winning." I mean,
melting down. And Maxine Waters always is good for entertainment. Yelling at that guy at the Department of Education when all the congressmen wanted to come in. What do you want to come in there? Why don't you go back to the office and do your job?
Yeah, well, I was going to talk about this, but so much to talk about. But the latest stats, and they're not right in front of me, that came out about reading and all. We're down the fourth and fifth graders right now in our country. They're at the 38th percentile in reading right now across the country, across public school systems. If that doesn't frighten people, I don't know what will. That 38% of only 38% of our fourth and fifth graders in public school can read at grade level right now. I mean, that's what they ought to be storming the Department of Education about.
There's a saying.
I just don't get it.
There's a great saying I come back to a lot. I may have used it here. If you want to see one's past, look at their present situation. If you want to see one's future, look at their present preparations. We were the leader of the free world. We were the ones with all the inventions. We were the ones that had the most patents at the patent office worldwide, developing the best technology, because that group that grew up with 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, that created what we have today. So this group today, if they can't read, they can't do basic math, they can't do critical thinking, that's where our country is heading 15, 20 years down the road. And then look at the Asian countries or any countries that's emphasizing education in their programs. And you look at China, they're putting out more engineers than we are. They're not putting out DEI and counselors and stuff like that. They are hardcore people that are going to go out and develop the next technologies. And that's a wake-up signal. And I hope Trump and the Doge team go in there and just revamp education. Unions need to be out of it as far as I'm concerned. I'm not a real strong union person. They had their benefit, they had their time, but I think we're beyond that. When you could hold a political ideology hostage or more dominant than the basic job a teacher's supposed to do, and that's education.
Well, where we went wrong with unions, because I've been involved in union stuff in the past, and even Franklin Roosevelt, they tend to forget this. He was adamantly opposed to government unions, adamantly opposed to them. So having a union in the private sector, like say construction, which I used to be involved in, at least there is a competition there. But when you start talking about federal union and government unions, they're literally bargaining with themselves. And that's one of the reasons why we've had such a bloated system. And I think unions in a competitive situation, then the best rise to the top. But in a governmental situation, it doesn't work that way. And as I remind people, even Roosevelt believed what I just said.
He did, and I'm all for that. I was in the union too. I was in the labor union, but what I saw was protectionism. I was working, and I worked my tail off. And the BA, the union business administrator, he pulled me to the side. He goes, "Yoho," he goes, "I'm not going to tell you not to work like you are." He goes, "But you're making these other boys mad in here, and I'm going to have to move you to another job." And I literally saw guys walking around with the same 2x4 all day, going back and forth. And I saw that protectionism in the VA when I was in Congress, protecting people that had physically pushed people. A white lady called a black employee a monkey or a gorilla. And I mean, just the nastiness of them, and the union protected them. And I've seen too many examples like that where the union is protecting people instead of motivating people to do better. Unions have done great. I mean, our workforce is here, but then you look at like Tim Fain, I think his name is, the head of the AFL-CIO, or the United Auto Workers. The strikes that he orchestrated with the major car companies. And then after they got their settlement, and you look at the settlement they got and compare that to people in the outside in the world, it's unsustainable. And he said he has called for a nationwide strike of all unions in 2028. And I think that's something that the Department of Justice should look at, because I think that's something that is really attacking our nation economy. And I think it's corruption.
Well, at the end of the day, the statistics show that quite a few union members actually voted for Donald Trump. And I think that's because at some level, right is right, and we're turning away from our founding principles. We only got a couple minutes left, but I want to cover this story that has broke out of Texas. It's unbelievable.
What's important?
But a suspect in Harris County, a deputy's death. In other words, this guy is accused of murdering, basically executing a sheriff's deputy. His name is Dramone Francis. He faces charges of capital murder and tampering with evidence related to a July 2024 killing of Deputy Fernando Esquidilla, I think is how you say it. He's been released on $1 million bond. This guy is, I want people to get a fair trial, but by all accounts, this guy is probably guilty. I'm just saying. And he's out on the street. To me, this is not only unjust, but it is insane. And when we have judges that are releasing people who are cop killers back on the street, it really shows how much work we still have to do.
We really do. And, those are like you said, we don't know if he's guilty or not, but it probably is, with the evidence they have. And to release him on $1 million bond, that means he had to put up 10%, $100,000. I couldn't come up. Well, I guess I could come up with $100,000 unless I had to ask my family and friends. I probably couldn't.
I know your wife; she might let you sit there, Ted.
But I mean, that's a chunk of change, and so this guy can do that. Let's just hope justice is served quickly and fairly.
Yeah, I think all of this stuff, and I hope everything is safe out there. But it's having a cumulative effect. And I do believe that's why Trump's approval ratings are still above 50%, because people are seeing in their own neighborhoods the consequence of this insane liberalism we've been living with really for a long time, but has just really come to a head in the last 4 years.
It really has. And, I think you're going to see all that change, especially when it comes to the violent immigrants that have come into this country and have taken advantage of a free society with rules and laws, and it will not stay that if people don't follow that. And we are heading down that to a nation of lawlessness, and we weren't far from that. And the tide is changing. And I saw something that I think that exemplifies that. Christianity has been falling as far as people subscribing to it. They've been getting away from that, but a new poll came out that said there's a reversal and people are going back to Christianity. And that goes back to what the founder said. In order to have a free society, you have to have a well-educated electorate that had morals and virtues. And that comes from your grounding in your religion, so you pick the right religion, but follow the sayings of that, the pure sayings of that.
The golden rule, man, friend. Golden.
Yeah, man.
Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed the show as much as Ted and I, I'm sure, have enjoyed bringing it to you. We're on every week, Monday and Fridays now at 9:00 across wherever you're seeing this podcast. Please support our sponsors, and have yourself a blessed weekend out there. And Ted, you and your family as well.
Right, and come join us on the podcast. Put in your comments and share the podcast with everybody you know, and support the sponsors. We appreciate you, John. Always good to talk to you, and I'll see you Monday.
Yep. Everyone is invited to jump aboard this pirate ship. Have a good one.
Good baits, tight lines, and tight drags.
There you go.